And it is time for the hot topic of the hour. A new Fox News poll show an increasingly tight race in swing states with just now 39 days to go before Election Day. Here's the breakdown for how voters feel in Arizona. In a two-way matchup, President Trump has the edge over Kamala Harris by 2 points in Arizona, when just last month she had a 1-point lead. Voters there also trust Trump to handle the economy and the border better than Kamala Harris. Over in Georgia, Harris is edging out Trump in a two-way matchup by 3 points, gaining 1 point since last month. But voters are still saying that Trump is more trusted to handle both the border and the economy there. The 45th president had a busy day at Trump Tower yesterday. Here he is speaking on Biden-Harris policies and what they've done to the southern border.
She did nothing to stop any of it. In fact, she encouraged them to keep coming. Kamala created a brand new program to fly in migrants from Venezuela, Haiti, and Nicaragua and resettle them in American communities, including small towns all across our nation. She's allowed virtually unlimited numbers of illegals to press a button, schedule their illegal immigration appointment at our ports of entry, and show up to be released into the interior of our country. Can anybody believe this? They did this on purpose. This was not a mistake on their part. They did this on purpose because their policies are so wrong and so evil and so unfair.
Kamala Harris will be headed to the Arizona border today for one visit before the election. This is her first visit to the border, although she says she was at the border once before. It could be her second visit. Michael Balboni, interesting to see Kamala Harris finally going to the border after not visiting at all during the almost 4 years in office.
And one of the things that she was tasked with, but the only thing that most Americans remember, was that she was supposed to be the border czar.
Right.
She was supposed to be the person in charge of this. And there was this whole big controversy. Well, if you're the border czar, how many times have you been to the border? Have you spoken to folks on the front lines? And then, of course, a lot of the, I don't know, let's move on to another topic. Now she's going, but what people ought to remember is that there was a huge issue, as you pointed out more times than anyone else, Maria. Trump says build a wall. Trump says stop the flow when he's president. Biden comes in and then changes so many of the executive orders that were designed to do this and stop the building of the wall. And now they sit there and they say, okay, we should stop this now. Wait a minute. You've been there for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Don't you have some responsibility?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. This is probably arguably the biggest misstep of this administration, the wide open border, because the impact has been far and deep, Rebecca. I mean, you're talking about crime, you're talking about jobs, you're talking about murder at the hands of illegal migrants. This has got to be the biggest misstep. Meanwhile, the same Fox poll shows Kamala Harris losing ground with key voting blocs, which typically lean Democrat. For example, in Arizona, Harris's 18-point lead with Hispanics has dwindled to an 11-point lead. She also lost ground with women, now holding just an 8-point lead there. But the biggest swing come from voters under 30 years old, who Harris had a 13-point advantage with last month, now seeing a huge swing toward Trump, who now has a 12-point lead. Interesting swing there. The poll also shows more of Trump's 2020 voters are sticking with him now than Biden's 2020 voters are backing Harris, Rebecca.
Yeah. You know, Maria, there was an interview that Kamala gave there where she was being questioned about not going to the border. And she said, well, I haven't been to Europe either. This was, like 2 years into her vice presidency. And it was like, that is not a comparable statement. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But to the point of what Trump was talking about, Maria, in that speech yesterday, and he was getting to the nefarious motives of this administration using an app, the CBP1 app. We've covered this on the show before, Maria. How they have flown in directly from countries, flown directly to our U.S. airports, bypassing the normal immigration status completely. They've flown in hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants this way. And this is a massive problem. And finally, someone is calling them out and saying, you can't do this. We just had a federal judge rule recently that is not legal. So we're going to get these CBP1 people. But where are they? We don't know, Maria.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy, Michael, the fact that not only has the border been wide open, but as a way to make it look better, fewer numbers at the border, they actually fly these people to swing states across the country. I mean, what is that?
Any American who stood online at JFK or LAX trying to get into the country has got to be scratching their head saying, wait a minute, the government's flying people into the center?
How crazy.
How nuts is that? Who's paying for that? How do I get that airfare?
Hey, you're paying. You know that.
Right.
We're paying.
That's right.
Unbelievable. Well, we are just getting started this morning. We've got a lot coming out. We are looking ahead to the August PCE report. It's out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Could be a market mover. We're going to bring you the numbers as they cross. Right now, we are exactly where we closed yesterday on the Dow Industrials at 42,555. NASDAQ is down 35 and the S&P lower by 3.25. Coming up, Pro-Chain Capital President David Towell is here with expectations.
Big Apple. Don't need to tell you that, but I can tell you how much. As of last month, the median asking rent for apartments in all the New York City boroughs was $3,425 a month. That number nearly double the national median of $1,753. Median rent in Manhattan is down 2.2% year over year, suggesting a dip in demand in the city's most expensive borough. In Queens and Brooklyn, rent up 11% and 5.1% respectively. If you want to rent in the biggest borough, Brooklyn, you need to make an estimated $155,000 a year to afford it. The Bronx, still the most affordable. The median rent there over $3,100 a month. All in, you're spending almost 40% on average of your income to pay for your rent, Maria, and the recommendation is 30%. We're over budgeting.
That's incredible, Lauren. I mean, look, here we are talking about, inflation coming down, and yet sticker shock remains when it comes to rent and housing costs.
Yeah, and I hear time and time again of my friends who do live in the city and they have adult children who are still living with them because they had to move out of their apartment because it just didn't make sense to pay the increase in rents. It's unbelievable. If you want to put it in dollar terms, it's about $180,000 a year salary that's needed to keep up with that 30% recommendation of income that goes to pay the rent. So it's unbelievable. Salaries are going up, just not enough to meet rent. And what do you get for all the money that you pay? That and taxes, especially in New York City, Maria. You don't get much. The city's a mess.
Oh, I know. Absolutely. The apartments are so small as well. But look, Rebecca, this has been the issue that we've been talking about throughout the Harris-Biden administration. Wages going down, inflation going up. And even though rent is down a little, you just heard the numbers there from Lauren, it's still, I think, out of reach for so many. And these are just the necessities. This is, housing costs, energy, and food.
Yeah, Maria, I feel like the country is feeling a bifurcation, a separation. The bottom half is almost feeling like they're living through already recession, possibly even depression, on how much everything has gone up, their food, their shelter costs, and their food. And then the rest of the top, I'd say 20% are feeling like, hey, it's the roaring 20s and everything is great. So we really have this separation between two classes. And unfortunately, most of the bottom half of the country is feeling like we're in recession and depression. And if that is how they feel, the administration is not going to be able to convince them that this economy is good.
Yeah, well, these failed policies have hit the lowest earners the hardest. There's no doubt. Lauren, thank you for that. Let's take a quick break and come right back. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on Fox Business. Stay with us. Welcome back. Good Friday morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and I hope you're having a good Friday morning. It is Friday, September 27th, 7:01 on the East Coast. Time for the hot topic of the hour. A looming port strike next week for workers on the East Coast and in the Gulf could cause devastating damage to the shipping industry. If the negotiation table remains empty, Fox Business's Grady Trimble is live this morning in Baltimore with the very latest. Grady, good morning to you.
Maria, good morning. Talks have been stalled for months, but now with just 4 days to go, the Biden-Harris administration is getting involved to try to avert a possible port workers strike. That's according to sources who tell Fox Business. The Biden-Harris administration has invited both sides in the ongoing port labor dispute to meet for talks in Washington, D.C. today. Obviously, the cost to the economy if this strike happens could be massive, up to $5 billion every single day by some estimates, and if it lasts a while, it could lead to shortages and higher prices. In an escalation yesterday, the employers group representing the port operators is accusing the union of unfair labor practices, asking the National Labor Relations Board to try to force the union back to the bargaining table. The union, though, firing back, calling the move a publicity stunt. The Port of Baltimore is the largest for cars and trucks in the country. Cox Automotive says vehicle inventory levels on dealership lots right now are healthy and could weather a slowdown, but vehicle parts, Maria, could be an entirely different story. Here's what Cox says on that front. Many of the assembly plants in the U.S., including Mercedes and Hyundai in Alabama, Kia in Southwest Georgia, Nissan in Tennessee, VW in Chattanooga, and BMW in South Carolina, could experience ripple effects if this strike happens. So there is a lot riding on this possible meeting today between the two sides in Washington, D.C., if both sides show up and a deal is able to get done in just 4 days' time. Heavy task, Maria.
They're not going to want this to go on through the election. I suspect the Biden-Harris administration is going to push for some closure here. Grady, thank you. Grady Trimble in Baltimore. Rebecca, how do you see it?
Maria, there's all this news about these Chinese potential, problems with these cranes at our ports. Like, we can't have our ports shut down. So I think that we need to take this seriously, especially on the East Coast, that this could be a food supply disruption. You know, Maria, they do these studies and they say that Americans usually go to the store at least once a week to, buy all their food for the week. So people don't have a lot of supplies at home, and this is something that could definitely impact them.
Yeah, what do you think, Michael?
So, estimated to possibly cost the economy $5 billion a day if this, in fact, were to shut down on the East Coast. This, you take a look at what's going on with Boeing. So obviously the unions are looking at this time coming up to this election. This is the moment to get their messages out. And this is what they're going to do. They're trying to squeeze to make sure that they can get to the table on these things. This is such a dramatic impact, though, because, again, as Rebecca just said, people don't have a lot of stuff lying around. And as you talked before, the cost of basic commodities, $5.50 for a gallon of milk, $7 for a carton of eggs. I spoke to a class of college students yesterday, and when I talked about the cost of living, they all began to vibrate and say, well, yeah, I have to find ways just to get food on the table as a college student. It's a dramatic thing, and what a lot of people don't appreciate the fact is that inflation only goes up. You never have a decrease in costs, so the increase gets baked into the daily expenditures. Now you have something where you disrupt the supply chain, and now you don't have availability. This is a recipe for a disaster economically as we head into this election.
This is the kind of thing that could spike an additional inflation move, right? I mean, Jason Trennert has been on this program, Rebecca, talking about the fact that when you have one spike up 6, 7, 8, 9%, obviously we went up to 9.1% in 2022. But when you have that kind of a spike, typically what you do is you get another spike a couple of months later. If you've got a strike, that's inflationary. If you have, a huge raise, they want like a 70% increase in wages. If you get that, that certainly is going to add to the inflation fire. And then maybe we do get a second spike.
Yeah, Maria, this is not an economy that has got the fundamentals that are roaring on all cylinders. So any kind of escalation at home, supply chain disruption, World War III escalation, anything. And we're looking at a really horrible, unfortunately, disastrous, in my opinion, stock market pullback.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you've got this moving commodities, Michael. Commodities have been one area that's been moving up in the face of these worries about inflation. So we'll see. I mean, do you think that this is one issue that could start a whole nother inflation upset?
Well, it raises a whole bunch of other issues, too. So when you take a look at what's happening to the transport of oil through the Middle East, and the Houthis who come in and they're striking ships, that's also a supply chain potential disruption. So around the world, we have to pay attention to how we're getting goods into this country and what we're doing to secure them, and then what are we doing to take this fragile economy? That's really the best description. It's a fragile economy, and make sure that we have a way to respond if, in fact, there's a disruption.
Yep. All right, let's take a short break and come back. We are just getting started this hour. Quick break, and we are looking ahead to the August PCE index. It's out in about an hour and a half, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. We'll bring you the numbers as they cross and check for market reaction. But first, we got the Word on Wall Street panel here with expectations. The markets are lower, but fractionally so. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on Fox Business. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. It's time now for the Word on Wall Street. Top investors watching your money. Joining me now is Rebecca Walser. Futures this morning, Rebecca, are lower. But, of course, we've had a week of all-time highs and a rally on Wall Street throughout the week after the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by half a point last week, and China inserted all the stimulus into its economy this week. The Dow is down 20 points right now, but it finished about 35 points away from record territory yesterday, hitting an all-time intraday high after multiple all-time highs this week. The Dow was up 260 points yesterday. The Nasdaq was up 108. Stocks, of course, have been hitting highs after China's central bank announced major stimulus plans, injecting 140 plus billion into the banks, making an impact on the Treasury market as well. Take a look at interest rates. Commodities also on the move as a result of the move in China. The yield on the 10-year is now sitting at 3.7%. Here's a look at commodities this morning. Gold has been on fire. Crude oil has come all the way down to 67.88, by the way. Copper has been rising. It is flat this morning. And silver has also been rising, although it is flat this morning. Rebecca, what are your thoughts on this China stimulus? The Chinese central bank saying it's injecting $142 billion into the banks. We know that they're doing a real big bailout there in an economy that has been weak, a lot weaker than some people think.
Yeah, Maria, I have so many thoughts. I'm so glad we have some time today. But let me tell you, China's market cap has gone down by $6.3 trillion since 2021. And so what I am looking at are the details of the stimulus, because I don't think that we're doing a good job in really telling people what's happening. The banks are required to have reserves, just like here in the United States, but they are lowering something called the RRR, the Reserve Requirement Ratio, Maria. So we are expecting 1 trillion of yuan, which is 142 billion, to your point, US dollars, of additional liquidity because they're simply cutting their reserves. So let me set the stage. The banks are starting to fail or have liquidity collapse, and they're going to go in and cut the reserves needed on failing bank system. That does not make any sense. And then they're talking about issuing special sovereign bonds that will be another 2 trillion yuan, which is basically 284 billion. So we're looking at a package of almost 500 billion US dollars, or not, it's under 500 billion, about 400 billion. And this is what they're saying they need, Maria, to re-stimulate this economy.
Well, look, I mean, the Shanghai Composite had its best week since 2008 this week. I spoke with Mark Newton yesterday from Fundstrat, technician at Fundstrat, that's Tom Lee's company, and he said, yeah, I think these Chinese stocks are going to rally, but this is going to be short-lived. And, you know, we've talked about China on a national security angle, and that really is, I think, the perspective to look at communist China. But investors wanting to make a quick buck are piling into some of these Chinese stocks because of this stimulus, not realizing or not caring about the fact that we don't even know where the money is, the profits are here. We don't know if the Chinese Communist Party is subsidizing all these companies. They don't give us accurate financials.
Yeah, it's nothing that you can trust. We need China to go onto the blockchain so that we can actually do business with them in a transparent and trustworthy way. But, you know, Maria, one thing I want to touch on with the Federal Reserve's 50 basis point cut last week is the fact that this is really a super aggressive cut. And not only did they come out with 50, but Maria, remember that when has that happened before? It happened in the dot-com crash 2001, preceded the dot-com crash, and it happened in 2007, preceding the global financial crisis. So we see that this is not a good omen for the economy. It usually reflects that we are already in recession. It just gets announced maybe 6 months to 8 months later. So I really believe that we are already in recession. But the bigger tell was what they forecasted, Maria. 2 more cuts expected this year, 4 more cuts expected in 2025, and 2 further cuts expected in 2026. So they cut 50 basis points, super aggressive, and then they told us, and we're going to give you 8 more. They are forecasting to me that the world is going into global depression. And if you look at crude, around 74 dropping to 67, you can see that global demand is starting to fall off.
Yeah, and a lot of people were surprised that it was a 50 basis point cut. You know, most people expected 25 basis point, but as we were getting close to it, there were a few people who said, yeah, half a point is coming. And you're right, the last time, or typically when we see a cut that size, it's in reaction to a major crisis. Yeah. Like 9/11, like, you know, the financial upset of 2006 and 2007. So do they know something that we don't know?
Well, that's exactly it. They did it also with coronavirus in 2020. It's only happened 3 times before. Coronavirus can be discounted, I think, because obviously that is, to your point, something that's happening. But what is happening? Why are they telling us this whole administration time? Everything is great. Look at the employment numbers. Labor market's going to let us ride the disinflation for a while. We're going to keep these rates high. And now all of a sudden, oh, wow, we're late to the game. We're going to cut 50 and we're going to give you 8 more cuts. And yet the economy is still strong, everyone. Everything's good. The unemployment numbers are dropping. Give me a break. People know that eggs are costing $7 a carton, and they're like, what is happening to my world? Yeah, well, let's look at the inflation data that's coming out this morning. This is obviously a market mover. It's the Federal Reserve's preferred read on inflation. That's the August PCE index, out in about an hour's time, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. The expectations called for a fractional move, a 0.1% increase month over month, and 2.3% increase year over year. So, Rebecca, how would you assess inflation today? We know it's come all the way down from the highs, but that's not helping enough people. It's still incredibly expensive, like you just said, eggs, bread, etc. You know, Maria, I think that Powell is really discounting it. I mean, I know that that's one of his mandates with unemployment. I understand that. I know that that's what his sticking point was this entire time that he raised rates 2022 to 2023. But the truth is, Maria, we had PCE come up last month a little bit unexpectedly. It was sticky. CPI was sticky last month, and that did not change the Fed at all from going for a 50 basis point cut. So that tells me, Maria, the day they're looking at is showing something alarming, and it's a lot bigger than inflation.
Yeah, well, look, you got an economy that is slowing at a time that inflation is still elevated. I mean, this is why people like Larry Summers were predicting stagflation. That's exactly what stagflation is. Slow growth and inflation spiking again. We don't know if we'll get a second spike, but it's certainly a possibility. And gold intraday yesterday, Maria, 2,700 all-time high intraday yesterday. Didn't close at it, but it's starting to get to that level of resistance. So there you go. Would you buy gold?
Absolutely, yes. We have a long runway for gold. Yes, this is not anywhere near where it's going to end.
All right. Rebecca, thanks very much. You're with us all morning long. We appreciate that. Quick break. More trouble for New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Details of his indictment have been revealed, showing bribery, conspiracy, and campaign finance violations allegations. New York Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis is here with reaction. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on Fox Business. Stay with us. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Friday, September 27th. It is 8:02 on the East Coast. Time for the hot topic of the hour. New Fox News polls show an increasingly tight race in the swing states with just 39 days to go before Election Day. Take a look at the breakdown for how voters feel in Arizona. In a two-way matchup, President Trump has the edge over Kamala Harris by 2 points, when just last month she had the edge of 1 point lead. So that's changed. Voters there also trust Trump to handle the economy and the border better than Kamala Harris. Over in Georgia, Harris is edging out Trump in a two-way matchup by 3 points, gaining 1 point since last month. But voters there still say Trump is more trusted to handle both the border and the economy. The 45th president had a busy day at Trump Tower yesterday, speaking on what Biden-Harris policies have done to the border. Watch this.
She did nothing to stop any of it. In fact, she encouraged them to keep coming. Kamala created a brand new program to fly in migrants from Venezuela, Haiti, and Nicaragua and resettle them in American communities, including small towns all across our nation. She's allowed virtually unlimited numbers of illegals to press a button, schedule their illegal immigration appointment at our ports of entry, and show up to be released into the interior of our country. Can anybody believe this? They did this on purpose. This was not a mistake on their part. They did this on purpose because Their policies are so wrong and so evil and so unfair.
Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is headed to the Arizona border today for one visit before the election. Michael, I don't think she's been to the border before, although there's an argument to be made that she went somewhere close to the border once before. But it's been 4 years. She hasn't focused on the border at all. And now she's going there today, 39 days before the election. Are you buying it?
So when you step back and you take a look at her tenure in office, the vice president has been really given a few jobs that was prominent and public. The first one was the border czar. So I was the Homeland Security czar for New York. Well, you want to bet every single day I spent trying to work with security forces and people in power to make things safer. What did she do? Who did she talk with? Who did she meet with? How do you do that remotely, never even going to the border and talking to the men and women, whether it's in the Border Protection Services or the sheriffs down in Texas? You know, we all know the story about the border. For years and years and years, it was just a local Texas problem, an Arizona problem, a California problem in the southern border. And then finally, people saw this as a national issue because people started coming into major cities, the sanctuary cities. That made it a national issue. Still, no protections done at the border. 6.5 million migrants is a rough estimate as who's come over the border in the last 3 years. What? Can we step back and say, how is that possible? How did we possibly allow that to happen? And again, as I was in the security chain in New York City, my biggest fear was that I didn't know who was here and what their motives were. And from a national security perspective, that is a huge issue. And we were talking about a fraction of the numbers that we've seen come across the border in the last 3 years.
Well, I mean, the Democrats like to muddy this story up, you know, and act as if the Republicans are against migration and immigration. No. It's what you just said. It's the fact that so many of these people are unvetted. And we have to have a structure in place to have people come in a legal way. Absolutely. And not that these illegal migrants are jumping the line in front of everybody else. When you were running Homeland Security for New York City and you say you were the border czar, were you worried about the national security issues the way we are today? Because today, this has become a security issue, no doubt about it. You've got the Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, running around New York City, robbing people, and you know that's the least of it, by the way. So how has it changed since when you were at the wheel in New York?
It's gotten much more local. In other words, you know, the gangs. All right, so that's an impact on crime. But nobody's talking about the fentanyl crisis. Really, yeah. We should be talking about that every single day. This is an act. It's a gray zone conflict. We have our opponents who are trying to come in to this country and poison our youth. We're seeing all these individuals come into the country, and a lot of the discussion is about, well, let's try to give them at least a contact and then release them into the country. That doesn't work because they're not returning it. We don't know where folks are going. That is a huge national security issue. And by the way, it's not just at the southern border. It is also at the northern border. And then when you go to your story you talked about all morning, where there's an app for people to push, and now they can get into the system, and they're being flown in from other countries. I mean, you know, again, we have diversified the opportunities for people to come into this country illegally. That is counter to everything that we think about national security.
Yeah, and it's only natural to ask why. Who would do this? Why would you have a wide open border and unvetted people coming in?
Yeah.
Look, Rebecca, these Fox News polls that we're looking at this morning, the same Fox poll shows Kamala Harris losing ground with one key voting bloc, which typically leans Democrat. In Arizona, Harris's 18-point lead with Hispanics has dropped to an 11-point lead. She's also lost ground with women. Women voters are now holding, she's got an 8-point lead. That was much bigger. The biggest swing, though, comes from voters under 30 years old. Harris had a 13-point advantage here last month. Now, a huge swing toward Trump. He's got a 12-point lead with voters under 30 years old. The poll shows more of Trump's 2020 voters are sticking with him as well than Biden's 2020 voters backing Harris. Rebecca, your thoughts?
You know, Maria, I'm disgusted actually by the Arizona poll where she's still within a couple of points of Trump. I mean, if you can't have a wide gap of at least 10 points on a border state that has let, Michael's saying 6.5 million. I think it's closer to 11 million people have actually, between the gotaways and all the people that they've actually tracked, have come in these last 3.5 years, almost 4 years. And thank God American people are waking up and saying, we are not going to buy into your xenophobic argument just because we understand the economics of 8 billion people on planet Earth, and that 8 billion people cannot fit in the lower 48 of the United States of America. Therefore, we must have rules that are actually applied and enforced. Otherwise, Maria, we're the same as every other country, and we're running out of dollars. We cannot afford the baby boomers to go into Social Security. Social Security is going to be bankrupt by 2034, and yet we're bringing all these people in and paying all of these people some kind of benefits to acclimate to America. We are bankrupt, and this has got to stop.
Yeah, wow, this is very concerning. Let's take a short break and come back at it. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on Fox Business. We'll be right back.
And Tampa's my hometown, Maria, as you know, so that's really sad to see. I know that street very well, Bayshore. And I'm really concerned because, Maria, this state is really at a crisis point for insurance. Homeowners insurance coverage is going up, in some cases 50% year over year, and a lot of insurers pulling out. And so these storms that come up, we used to track storms over Haiti for 2 weeks and have a 2-week warning. Now we're getting a 3-day warning, and there's a Category 4 storm. So I don't know what's going on, but this is a really big problem for Florida.
Well, I mean, you're right. You make a good point on insurance. Michael, sometimes the insurance company won't even give you enough insurance because you live by the water.
Right. So it's been a problem for Florida for many, many years. In 2022, the Florida legislature enacted a law that essentially shored up a lot of the insurers, but it's still about availability and costs. And especially if you have property near the water, the price escalations we saw before this storm have been dramatic, and a lot of the non-renewals that are coming up. So I think the Florida legislature probably have to go back in and say, you know what, we need to re-examine this. I live on St. Pete, Florida, and we had a almost 8-foot surge there, came over the seawall for the first time. I've owned the place for 10 years, first time.
Wow, that's incredible. All right, let's take a short break and come right back. Rebecca, Michael, thank you. You're watching Mornings with Maria live on Fox Business. We'll be right back.